Hello everyone, thank you so much for clicking on yet another episode of Pages from My Notebook, a True to Life podcast. My name is Erica, your host, and today we're talking about failure, how to find freedom in failing. And more importantly, what it's like to truly just not give a fuck anymore about anything once you've gotten over the anxiety of doing wrong or messing up. I'm going to share my experience with failure and how it's really opened up so many things in my life for me to learn about myself and live more freely. So if you're interested in hearing about that, keep on listening. Recently, I was just sitting and thinking about how much failure and the idea of not doing well, of not being the best at something, is ingrained in us from childhood. And we're taught that failing or being a failure is the ultimate disappointment, the worst thing that you can do. And it's a reflection of you as a person, you not being able to handle something, you not understanding something, you not being good enough at something or comprehending something. And that's really messed up that we teach kids that failing is something wrong with them fundamentally, because failure is a part of life. Nobody is just going to win at every single thing they do the first time they do it. And this is reinforced by the punishments that we get when we fail. When you fail a test, you don't get to have extra recess. You don't get the pizza party. Things get taken away from you. And again, you're looked at as less than the potential that somebody has placed onto you. And we're taught that every little mess up, because it has these repercussions, because we're taught to feel bad about ourselves for not getting things right, each failure is looked at as a monumental event that we'll never be able to overcome, or it'll take so much effort because it is this terrible, awful thing that needs to be avoided at all costs. And I bring back the point that nobody is born just being good at everything. Everyone needs to learn and be taught how to do something. But when what we're taught is all about how to not fail instead of how to learn from things going wrong, we know that failure is going to happen, but we rarely know what to do when it happens and how to handle it and how to think about it and how to learn from it. Instead, we are very fearful of it, and that's where people, especially children, get these complexes and anxieties about doing well all of the time. And when they fail, they really believe that they are a terrible person because they were never taught to, one, expect failure, but two, to handle it and know that that's just a natural part of learning and actually a reflection and showing that you're going to get better at something because you have a basis of learning so that you can see where you can improve. And for me, a lot of the times, I'm a very sensitive person. I was a highly sensitive child, and I would be punished a lot or spoken down to for crying or feeling a type of way about a way a person treated me or whatever feeling it is. And even that, in the way that we respond to people's actions and we make them think that their natural reactions that actually aren't harmful or bad are failures because you're not reacting in the correct way. And it goes back to hair. If we don't wear our hair the right way, we're failing at presenting ourselves in the way that girls should. If we don't weigh the right thing, we're failing at presenting ourselves in a way that looks quote unquote healthy. All of these things are attached to failing, but really you're not failing. You're just not subscribing to the image and projections that other people have placed on you. And this is stunting so many people because, like I said, being reprimanded for crying at things that made me upset made me think that I was wrong for feeling emotions, when actually that could have been a teaching moment to show me, hey, maybe this thing can be reframed not to make you sad, but to make you think differently about it. Or it could be thought that, hey, this is maybe a misunderstanding, so when we speak about what is going wrong and what's making us feel bad, we can then learn how to approach that situation differently in the future. And I've had to learn how to unpack that and not get down on myself for feeling my emotions and not feeling like I'm failing at being strong, when really I'm just in tune with how I feel, and that just happens to be how I show it. And that's why I am so happy that I'm now at a point in my relationship with failure that I'm okay with it, and we have an understanding in that it's not a fundamental flaw on my part. It just helps me approach things differently, and I no longer shame myself for my reactions when I do fail at something. And failure isn't universally looked at as this horrible thing. In a lot of different cultures, they do look at it as a positive. I remember taking self-defense class, and I've seen this in other examples, but the first thing they do is teach you how to fall safely, and how to fall correctly. And again, that's preparing you. And they're knowing, especially in martial arts and everything, that whole culture is about learning from someone who's better than you at something, by practicing, by learning your opponent and knowing that you're not going to win all of the time. So by teaching you and preparing you for the fall, but also how to fall, you're preparing people to be better learners and to be able to pick themselves up after, if and when they do fall. And when you're prepared for something, you start to realize that it's not a reflection of who you are as a person if something goes wrong, if you don't do the right thing, if you fail, because you're learning about yourself. If you know that I fall at this certain point in time, or I am not as confident in this, or I don't necessarily have the skills right now, you recognize that that's just a product of your circumstances. And through failure, and not even everything is a failure if you don't get something right. I just say failure because it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. And again, like I said, being taught that every little thing that somebody doesn't agree with is being reprimanded as this huge failure. I think unpacking, again, the stigma around that word and showing that failing isn't always this horrible thing. But once you realize how to fail and that it will happen, you start to reframe it as not this horrible thing that's going to destroy me, but an opportunity for me to learn about myself, the situation, how I react to the situation, all kinds of different things. In my experience growing up, and especially going through school and realizing the areas that I'm skilled at and that I enjoy and I tend to do well in, and the ones that I don't, it's not always failing itself that is so scary. Especially in college, I've learned that mediocrity is okay. Sometimes the best you can do isn't really that great on a technical grading scale, but if that's the effort, all the effort that you have and all that you could put forward, it's okay. But when I was younger, it wasn't always failure itself, seeing a bad grade or being picked last for something, whatever. It's the reactions of other people and the expectations that I felt so heavily on my shoulders. As a highly anxious kid, as a high achieving kid, you know the whole stigma about kids being put in gifted and talented, and now we think like that our talents were inherent, but really it was just us being a product of our circumstances, and now in the real world we're not actually that exceptional. That's a whole nother can of worms, girl. But I was really more scared of what people would think about me because I quote unquote failed, more so than the actual lack of achievement itself. And that's the craziest thing, because failure is so personal, but also so public. And when we think we failed at something, it's usually because it's done on a public forum. It's a test we take and we compare grades with our classmates. It's running in a race or playing a sport and not getting a medal or whatever you athletes do. It's always something that we're putting ourselves out in front of people to see. And especially in this culture where everything on the internet is a highlight reel, everybody is winning, 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 winning. You start to try and expect that of yourself all of the time, comparing yourself to your peers, when really they're not always winning either. They're just only showing the good times. At the beginning of my college career, that was weighing so heavily on me. Even before moving in, I just felt like I had so much to prove, not only to myself or the teachers in my high school or people I went to high school with, but the people in this new environment, these kids that The university said you were the best of the best in your high school, but now all of the best are here and you're all on an even playing field and nothing really matters anymore. So I was so scared of falling behind and looking dumb to all these people who were smarter than me or better than me at all of these things. And in trying to avoid being perceived as a failure, I burrowed in myself. I didn't put myself out there really. And when I actually did struggle, because I ignored my gut feeling that I shouldn't have been studying engineering and that wasn't the field for me, but I was trying to prove myself and not be a failure and not be the black girl that couldn't crack the hard math and science that the white kids were doing. But really, me realizing that that wasn't for me wasn't a failure. It's just a pivot. The only thing I failed was myself and my self-esteem and my purpose by trying to fit into this mold that nobody really put me in but myself. Yes, it's positive to see black girls in engineering, and at the time I thought I was interested in it, but I thought that changing my direction was a sign of failure, that I was always the girl that people could depend on for being smart, knew that she would have the answers, knew that I would be good at something. And so to get to this place that I've been working so hard for, all through grade school, and then to suddenly change that, I was like, I can't go out like that. I can't fail myself and all these other people in this way. But just like some hard-headed people need to experience something firsthand that someone told them not to do in order to really understand why they said not to do it, as someone with such a, not perfectionist, but like anxious attachment to doing well, I had to experience that monumental failure to really understand it's just you and this, girl. You have you, and there's no award or accolade or letter on a transcript is going to be there for me when I'm feeling anxious, when I feel down, when I am not fulfilling what I'm put here to do. If I'm feeling miserable, but everyone is congratulating me for getting good grades, what does that really mean? What is that really doing for me as a person in my life? And the only way I could have been freed from that and removing the stigma of failing by switching my path was to fail out of it. As unfortunate as that was, but that extreme failure that really tore my entire life apart, now looking back at it, it was necessary for me to get to the point I'm at today. Hey y'all, whether you're an avid listener already or want to make your own podcast like me, Anchor is the easiest way to get started. Let me tell you about it. It's free. You can record and edit your podcast directly from your phone or computer. Anchor will do all the heavy lifting and distribute your podcast for you to major platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can even make money from your podcast. Yes, you can secure the bag with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So for those that haven't listened to the podcast before, I'm a rising senior in college, and I began my college journey as an engineering major. And going into it, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and I was like, I'm going to do this despite me being horrible at math, not liking chemistry, but I had gotten in, so I was like, this has to be a sign of something that I can do it. And entering the program, it was very swiftly made apparent that this was not going to work out. I wasn't doing well in class. I was having panic attacks, anxieties, all of this. And like I mentioned before, socially trying to keep up and not represent myself as this nervous girl who's scared that she's just a phony and doesn't really belong here. And I realized that one of my biggest fears in life was embarrassing myself, was looking like I wasn't the girl that everyone had thought me out to be. And like I mentioned before, in grade school and high school, I was always looked at as one of the smart ones, one of the people who always has it together. And now in college, in this big ocean, I'm not the biggest fish anymore. And I was very quickly realizing that I was over my head and knowing that I was struggling, I felt embarrassed, so deeply embarrassed that I didn't know what was going on in class. When people were comparing answers on a worksheet, I stayed silent because I didn't know what was going on. And the energy of trying to keep myself afloat that way and trying to catch up to the work and push through, it was just terrible. I had panic attacks. I would leave class to like cry in the bathroom. I just stopped going to class. I became depressed. It was just me putting all this energy into avoiding failure pushed me towards it in a way that I couldn't have even imagined. And it made me ignore all the signs that literally my body was telling me, besides everything else, when I really sit and think about it, that I wasn't doing what was right for me. And so eventually I couldn't do it anymore. I withdrew from most of my classes, and the ones I was still in, I would barely go. I barely had energy to do anything, dealing with depression and anxiety on top of all of these things. And there was no way I could have imagined that this would happen. There was no way that I thought I was going to withdraw from classes, that I would lose my scholarship, that I would end my first semester in college with a 1.0 GPA. And of everything I could have imagined college to be, there absolutely nothing prepared me for that. And again, I felt so embarrassed that I had failed. And not only that I had failed, but that I had ignored myself for so long that I got myself to this point. And it was honestly my rock bottom. I didn't know myself anymore. And it was so scary to think that I was just sort of like this shell of a person. And I describe it as like racing against your ghost in Mario Kart, in that I could see myself going through the motions every day, but I wasn't really there. I wasn't really in it. I wasn't really living. And it's a mourning process when you finally realize, wow, this is over. I didn't do it. It didn't work out. This is not a win. It's a fail. And for me, I had to sit in it and face it because I was here now. I made it to college. I have these loans on the books. Even if I drop out, I got to start repaying them. But I knew that I didn't want to drop out. I just didn't want to be in that program. And I'm not going to say I shouldn't have been or I didn't deserve to be, because they accepted me for it, but everything had fallen apart. And after I had spent my time mourning the college experience or first year experience that I thought I was going to have, I realized that, okay, I failed. This is going wrong. I lost the scholarship. I have all these things going wrong. It hurts like hell, but I'm still alive. I'm still here. My family still supports me. My friends still love me. I still have a roof over my head. And I had options. That's the most important thing, is I had options. And when you're in the middle of a situation trying so hard to appear like you're not struggling and to not fail, you think that it's all on you. You put all of the weight on your shoulders, and the pride of it all keeps you from reaching out and asking for help. And on top of that, you think the help doesn't exist, but it does. And even though I was at my rock bottom, I said, you know what? I'm still here and I have options and I can make things better. And it wasn't easy. On top of recognizing academic failure, it was like my entire life, my personality being the girl that's this, the girl that is expected to do this. Now that all those expectations are gone, and now that I had failed at those expectations, and following them up until this point had gotten me here, which was ignoring what I really wanted and not knowing who I am beyond my academic performance, who am I? And I have all this time because I'm in 2 classes. So what are we going to do? How are we going to get this back on track? I felt like dropping out because, again, I felt like I had no other options there. My college career was done, but I knew I didn't want to. I knew I went to college for a reason. I wanted to, and to make a difference. So out of that failure, I got back on the internet. I got back to that course catalog. I tried my best to not only redirect my academic path, but to figure out who I was. I took advantage of all of the free things in the city. I just tried so hard to figure out, who is Erica? Who is she when you take away the student label, when you take away the friend, when you take away everything, because that's where I was. It was literally taking it day by day and finding successes in the little things. I took a shower today. I ate 3 meals today. I felt the sunshine on my skin. Little things like that. And experiencing that failure made me realize the wins every day, and that just having a new opportunity to try again is a win. And finding myself, that wasn't a good process either. Some clubs weren't for me. Some situations I still felt awkward and uncomfortable in. But even if I went to a situation and I didn't really talk to anyone, or I didn't come out of it with a new friend, I didn't any longer see it as a failure. My goal was just to go out and make it there. And I started to congratulate myself for doing things that were manageable, but even if things didn't turn out the way I expected, I still was able to accomplish something. And that is where the importance of teaching people how to look at failure comes in, because you can say, hey, I got an F on the test. Oh, well, but you can look at it and say, okay, I got an F because I didn't understand this, this, and this. So maybe I can spend more time studying these areas, or I need to shift my focus and the way that I study these things so I can do better next time. But I'm going to forgive myself for not performing the best on this particular test because of the circumstances. And I had to apply that to my entire life. Nobody is judging me because I'm eating alone in the dining hall. No one's judging me because I'm walking around a museum by myself. I am not failing just because I don't look like every other college student, hanging out with friends or going to parties or doing whatever. Part of my process in learning to deal with failure was going at it alone, was figuring out who I was as a person without trying to measure up to different social expectations. And again, I'm talking about it now because I've been through it and been able to process it, but I did still feel bad for being alone. I did feel lonely. I did feel like a loser. I did feel like uncool, or again, failing at the college experience because I wasn't going out and doing all the stuff. But it was a time I needed to take to reframe how I think about my life and how I think about myself. And my life after conquering the anxiety of failure has been so much better. After conquering my fear of failing, I learned that I should never, and I don't have to, put myself at risk or put my well-being on the line for the sake of appearances or expectations or looking like I should or doing what I should do. After everything fell away from me trying to live up to these expectations that I felt were put on me, I realized that that's not my responsibility to make other people happy. It's not my responsibility to fulfill the image of me that someone else has in their mind. It's not my job to be the perfect representation of every Black girl, of every whatever, all of the time. The only job and responsibility I have is to me, and that's to show up for me, as my complete authentic self. And in order to do that, I had to figure out who I was and remove shame and punishment for not being great at everything, for not knowing everything about myself at that time. And now, going into my young adulthood, I'm giving myself grace. I'm giving myself the space to just exist as I am in this very moment. I know my morals. I know where I stand. I know the type of person I am. And I know that it's okay if those things change. I know that it's okay if one day I act one way and one way And one day I act another way. I know it's okay for me to not feel confident all the time, but that doesn't mean I failed at loving myself or finding out who I am. Me existing in all of the ebbs and flows that I will have just as a human with emotions is okay. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have a good day. And it's okay to share when you have each of those days. And it's okay to keep it to yourself. Just me existing is a win, because not everybody gets that chance. And it's so freeing to think, okay, even if I don't do as well at this, I know that there is something I can learn from it, or I can assess and think, that wasn't so bad. And I can just move on. When you let go of being scared of failure, because punishment for failure is shame. It's always, remember when you messed up this? Remember when you fumbled that and it caused us to lose this? But when you remove the anxiety from that and you realize that it's all just experiences, you no longer spend precious energy on thinking about what you didn't do in that moment, but you're focused on who you are right now. Because the past is the past. It's done. And all we can do is take care of ourselves now and try to help prepare ourselves for the future. And I ask myself, do I wish that I never hit rock bottom and had all these bad things happen to me? Sure, I wish it didn't hurt so bad. I wish I didn't feel bad for as long as I did, but I'm very grateful for the growth and the experience and the freedom that I now feel releasing the shackles of always being excellent all of the time. I love the phrase Black mediocrity over Black excellence, because we should just be allowed to not have to work 6 times as hard to get half of what they get. We should be allowed to just be. And that's what I'm enjoying, is just being. And if I get a C on something, hey, I can try better the next time and learn from it. If I get an A on something, cool, awesome. If I get 0.5 points off, that's not the end of the world. I've learned that failure is going to happen. It's just part of me, but it doesn't define me. All it does is give me another perspective of my life and how I navigate within it. I really wish I could give tips or lessons on how I came to this experience with failure, but I think it's a deeply personal thing. I can tell you that it doesn't really matter. No one is putting these expectations on you. But until you realize that for yourself, other people's words aren't going to be able to penetrate that barrier of those walls of shame and guilt that we have built up around failing at things. But I implore you, the next time something goes wrong or you think you did something bad or embarrassed yourself, remind yourself that that is temporary. This feeling of feeling bad for not doing well at something, it's okay, it's natural, but it doesn't control you. It doesn't determine anything about who you are. It's just at this moment, things didn't go right. And that's okay. That's going to happen. That's meant to happen. We can't appreciate the ups without the downs. And as you continue to extend yourself compassion like you would to somebody that you love, you start to realize that people don't remember often the times that you failed. I thought everyone was going to be so disappointed at me that I was no longer an engineering major. But when I went back to my high school and they asked me what I was studying, they didn't even remember that I started out that way, So it's really, everything feels monumental in the moment, but I promise you it's not. It's just a stop on your journey. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Just a little thing I've been thinking about, and as I go into my senior year, I'm just ready to accept what comes and give myself the grace to mess up, to figure out what I'm doing, why I'm here, because that's the point, is to learn and be me. And I'm ready to be open to new experiences and not worry about if people think I'm awkward or embarrassing, because sometimes I am. That's just the reality of it. And that's a part of me that I love, because that's what makes me unique. But also it's something that maybe can resonate with other people and they won't feel as bad about themselves because of it. Or if it's just genuinely not a good moment, it's going to pass and these people probably won't remember. So I'm very happy to share my journey with you all. And I hope that it helps you start to think about things differently. Share it with a friend that you maybe think could learn something from this episode. And I really hope to have you listening again soon for another episode of Pages from My Notebook. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Pages from My Notebook, a True to Life podcast, is a passion project by yours truly, Erica Barnes. Read episode descriptions and more at pagesfrommynotebookpod.com. Follow the pod on Instagram at pagesfrommynotebookpod and like the pod on Facebook at facebook.com/pagesfrommynotebookpod. You can support the pod monthly via Anchor at anchor.fm/Erica-Barnes/support. I hope to have you listening again soon.